Maybe I should start with the truth, because there's no point in pretending. I wasn't born unlucky or misunderstood. I was born average and made myself into the kind of man people warn their kids about. I never craved sympathy, and if anything, the word itself makes my skin crawl. But what I'm about to tell you isn't about sympathy. It's about what happens when the mask you choose to wear finally begins to suffocate you. My name isn't Dylan, but it's what you can call me. I grew up bouncing from foster care to foster care in the southern edges of Illinois, and by 15, I learned two things. Most people are busy worrying about their own lives, and the rest can be taken advantage of. My earliest memories are patchworks, smoked windows, creaking porch swings, the sound of someone else's parents yelling. I used to practice lying the way some kids practice piano. After a while, you get good enough that you almost believe yourself. My reputation followed me. Small-time cons at first, shoplifting, pickpocketing at bus stops, skipping out on diner bills. It escalated quickly, because that's how hunger always does. By 23, I steered clear of anything armed or violent. I wasn't about hurting people, just bleeding them dry a little at a time. I liked to think of myself as the gentleman thief, though the truth was way less cinematic. On the worst night of my life, everything I thought I knew about myself got crushed under the weight of someone else's secret. But I'm getting ahead. Back then, I ran a simple con in places where trust lived too long. My favorite marks were lonely, elderly couples in faded towns, always a little behind on good advice, the kind who still left milk and bread outside for neighbors. My partner on those nights was a car that looked honest, a battered gold Corolla, and an emergency kit I put together like a Boy Scout, minus the badge. I would show up breathless at someone's porch, eyes wide and palms up, spinning a story about a broken-down car and a sick wife across town. Most people wanted to help. Most people aren't monsters. On the evening that changed everything, I was several hours from home, coasting through a grid of cracked blacktop streets in a tiny Indiana town so nondescript I won't even bother giving it a name. I'd spent the afternoon casing houses with cars that hadn't moved in a week, flower pots still full, dogs barking behind chain link. It was a hot July dusk, and the sky glowed like an old bruise as I finally parked outside a one-story home with faded blue shutters and a wooden ramp instead of stairs. I remember rehearsing my lines in the rearview mirror. Please, I'm sorry. I just need to make one call. My phone's dead. My wife's in labor. Stupid, obvious lies, but you'd be amazed how well they work on people raised before caller ID. I got out, feeling almost nothing, as if I was watching myself step into someone else's movie. The porch light snapped on with a stutter, the way old fluorescent bulbs do. I knocked twice, sharp and panicked. The door opened right away, a frail woman, gray hair pulled tight, eyes brighter than seemed possible in her gaunt face. "You lost, honey," she said. Her voice was gentle, and in that split second, I almost felt a flicker of shame. I played the part. Tears in my voice, tremor in my hands. She ushered me inside like she was letting in a stray cat from the rain. Her husband sat in a recliner, listening closely. "Just a call," I promised, eyes down, already scanning the room for valuables, silver frames, a coin jar, the shape of a safe behind an old dresser. But as the door clicked shut behind me, I realized the house didn't feel like any of the others I'd robbed before. There was a smell, sweet and sour, like wilted flowers hidden under something rotten. And despite every instinct telling me to leave, I stayed. What happened next proved I was not the only liar in the room, and that even the best predators eventually find out what it's like to be hunted. Shall I continue to the next section? If there's one thing I'd learned, it was to read a room in seconds, spotting what was valuable, what was vulnerable. But that house, something about it threw me off. The wallpaper was yellowed, decorated with faded roses. The clock above the TV read the wrong time, and a huge old ceramic pitcher on the bureau seemed to vibrate, rattling every few minutes, like it was settling into itself. The couple was polite, almost too polite. Their questions were strange. Not where was I headed, but who knew I was here? Did anyone expect me back soon? Did I have family nearby? I answered smoothly, but the hair on my arm stood up. The woman, she introduced herself as Marion, asked if I'd like a glass of water. I nodded, mostly to buy time, and as she tottered to the kitchen, I surveyed the room again. The man never looked away from me. He had a tremor in his hand and a faded army tattoo, but his gaze was sharp, knowing. For a second, I wondered if I'd picked up the wrong signals, if these people were savvier than they acted. It only got stranger. Marion came back, set down a sweating glass, and insisted I sit, for just a minute. Love, it's so hot out there. Her husband said nothing. I still don't know why I obeyed. I suppose I was lulled by routine, the pattern I'd repeated in so many houses before. But the longer I sat, the more I felt watched. There were thick curtains over every window, and I realized with a jolt that not a single light except the one in the living room was on. Would you like to use the phone now? Marion asked suddenly, her tone oddly pressed, as if it was an important test. I smiled, pushing fake gratitude into my reply, and asked where it was. On the window ledge, in the kitchen. You'll see it, the old rotary. I nodded, walked as casually as I could to the kitchen, and as I reached for the phone, the house went suddenly, unnaturally quiet. I dialed the random number I'd planned to use as cover, but the line was dead. No dial tone. I glanced over my shoulder. Marion stood in the hall behind me, watching, face blank. It hasn't worked for ages, she murmured. But people always feel safer if they can pick up the receiver. I gripped the phone, pulse thudding. Your car out there. Are you sure it's not just overheated? She didn't blink. Maybe you'd better sit down and rest until my son gets back. He's very handy with engines. My mouth dried. I hadn't seen another car outside. No, that's all right. I should probably get home before my wife worries. Her polite smile never changed. It's not safe to walk at night, dear. Lots of accidents out here. People come to visit, but they don't always make it where they're going. The word stuck. The man in the living room still hadn't moved. He sat with his gaze fixed, knuckles white around the arms of the recliner. As Marion walked closer, her gentle exterior brittle now, I caught a faint shimmer outside the window, the reflection of headlights, bouncing down the road. A car pulled into the driveway, tires crunching. Adrian, their supposed son, stepped into the porch light, a big, wide-shouldered man in coveralls, eyes small and cold. He carried nothing in his hands, but I felt suddenly trapped. We've been expecting company, Marion sang, voice high, almost giddy. I moved to the hallway, every muscle tense, rehearsing excuses, praying for a sliver of an opening. Then Adrian pointed at me and said, "He's not from town. I've seen his car here before. He's been watching houses." I froze. Had I been made? Panic threatened to close my throat, but I forced my voice steady. I just needed help. Honest, but even I didn't believe it. Marion's smile widened, unnatural and sharp. Well, we don't get many visitors anymore. That was the first time I felt afraid, truly, bone-deep afraid. I realized that in my quest to be the wolf, I'd wandered into another hunter's trap. I should have left then, but something about the locked windows and that dead phone told me, not every trap is meant for the innocent. And some houses keep secrets even their owners are afraid of. For the first time in a long while, I was caught unprepared. I thought of bolting, just sprinting past Marion to the front door and booking it down the road. But Adrian blocked the way, arms folding across his massive chest, a shadow stretching from kitchen to hall. He smiled, but there was nothing kind in it. He just said, "Town's not as safe as it used to be. Not for strangers." The clock on the wall ticked, not in time with my heartbeat, but too slow, like it wanted me to listen. I played for time, an old habit. I really appreciate the generosity, but it's late. If you can just give me a flashlight, I'll walk it. No trouble. Adrian shook his head and stepped aside. "We'll check your car together," he said. His voice didn't match the smile. Marion vanished into a back room, her steps soft as dust. The front door creaked open, not from my doing, but because Adrian opened it like it was his house, not theirs. I stepped onto the porch, the air thick and impossibly still for a summer night. The woods behind the house seemed to press closer, black lines against the horizon. I could see my Corolla glinting under the street lamp, looking suddenly much farther than I remembered. We walked together in silence. My mind was whirring, calculating options. Adrian was younger, faster, heavier. Running wasn't going to work. The road was empty in both directions. I tried to keep calm, but something was wrong. The night was too quiet. No crickets, no dogs, no distant TVs, just the drag of Adrian's boots in the gravel. He reached my car first, crouched, and peered under the hood, then around the tires. "Pretty clean for a breakdown," he said. I managed a nervous laugh, but my fingers twitched against my thigh. Luck, I guess, I muttered. He didn't answer. Then, as he knelt down, I realized my keys had been in my pocket the whole time. I never left them in the ignition, but I reached for them on reflex, thinking I could unlock the door, jump in, and slam it shut, lock out Adrian, and hit the gas. Except when I tried the key, nothing happened. I looked down. For flat tires. Deflated completely, rubber pressed into the dirt like overripe fruit. My heart lurched. I knelt, pretending to check the damage, and Adrian came closer. Funny how cars do that out here, he said softly. See, most folks round these parts don't leave after sunset. You'd know that if you were from here. I tried to stand, but his hand was suddenly on my shoulder, a grip like a clamp. Don't try to leave, friend. Adrian's voice was just above a whisper. Mom and Dad hate being surprised this late. Brings out the old nerves. What hit me then wasn't panic, but a full-body chill. I had flashbacks to every small-time scam I ever pulled, all the times I thought I was the smartest in the room. Now I was standing in the empty dark, 3-on-1, car immobilized, with no one knowing where I was or why I'd come. I'd stepped directly into a web that had been spun long before I showed up on their driveway. He steered me back toward the house with that big hand, saying almost kindly, "Let's get you patched up inside, and my father can take a look at your car when he wakes up." Wake up? The house had seemed quiet, but now a new shadow flickered in the front window. An old man, they called him Leonard later, shuffled forward, cane in hand, but eyes awake and uncannily alert. For an instant, our gazes met. I could see a kind of hunger just below the tired lines of his face. Marion reappeared, gliding like a shadow herself. She pressed a rough blanket into my arms. "You'll sleep on the couch tonight. Roads will be better at dawn." Then she locked the door behind me with a solid click, and, for the first time, I felt like prey in every sense of the word. I tried the windows, locked. I paced the living room, every floorboard creaking like a warning. The family moved through the halls in silence, like ghosts. I wondered what kind of secrets were buried in this house. Wondered how many strangers had ever left once they walked through that door. That night, lying awake in the gloom, I heard sounds that proved I wasn't the only uninvited guest in that house, and the truth about what this family kept hidden was far worse than anything I'd ever done. I lay on the stale-smelling couch in a living room that felt more like a waiting room for something dark than a place anyone would sleep. The overhead fan hummed unevenly. Every time its shadow circled the pale ceiling, my mind replayed every mistake I'd made to land here. I kept an eye on the door and another on the hallway, listening to the shuffle of Marion's slippers on tile, Leonard's occasional cough, Adrian moving with deliberate heaviness somewhere down the hall. But there was someone else. Somewhere in that house was another presence, subtle at first, barely a breath, then a scrape, like metal on wood, somewhere above me. It could have been nothing, but in that endless dark, my senses sharpened. More than once, I caught a flicker of movement, a faint shadow at the edge of the kitchen, a slow, rhythmic knock from the back of the house, so soft it could have been mistaken for water pipes. With the family settled, the three of them in corners of separate rooms, I finally dared to stand and quietly pace the perimeter, feeling every bump in the ancient wallpaper, peeking at every latch and lock. It was then I noticed the photo frames clustered on an old sideboard. Most of them were sepia-toned, showing a much younger Marion and Leonard, flanked by kids and neighbors who all looked happier, unworried by the weight that now hung in the house. One frame, however, was empty, a fresh crack slicing across its glass. I lifted it to see scrawled on the back, in careful, childlike writing, "Don't ever forget." It wasn't the only odd thing. I found a stack of letters under a side table, all addressed to the resident, written in shaky, desperate script. Each envelope was opened, but the letters remained inside. I scanned one. Passage is passage. If they come, don't send them away. Let the night take what it needs. Lock the doors before sunrise. My vision swam, head pounding as I heard a loud thump from upstairs. I shot a glance at the stairwell, trying to judge if I could make it quietly to the front door and out, but Adrian was leaning in a doorway just beyond, arms crossed, staring dead at me. "You lost?" he asked, with the faintest curl of a smirk. I forced a smile. "Sorry, looking for a bathroom." "It's right there." He nodded down the hall, never breaking eye contact. I quickly shut myself in the tiny, peeling tile bathroom and locked the door. The mirror above the cracked sink caught my tired, drawn reflection. I tried to calm my breathing, but each inhale filled me with the smell of some chemical, something bitter lingering in the air. I turned the faucet, cold water pouring over my trembling hands. As I splashed water on my face, a soft scratching sound started up behind me. It was coming from the ceiling, from an old vent. I leaned up, squinting, and for the briefest moment, caught a pair of small, dark eyes peering down at me, gone in an instant, almost like a trick of the light. My heart almost stopped. I staggered back, tripping over the mat, knocking a bar of soap to the floor. The scratching faded. I listened as my own pulse pounded in my ears. There were noises I couldn't place, furtive footsteps overhead, then the soft sound of Marian humming somewhere out of sight, her tune broken, off-kilter. I counted backward from 10, steadying myself, but deep inside, I felt something inside the house didn't want me to leave. Or maybe someone. When I stepped back out, Adrian was gone, and I tiptoed toward the living room to see the grandfather clock blinking 2:04 a.m. As I passed the hall closet, a draft fluttered against my leg. I glanced down and spotted a rope, frayed and damp, poking out from under the door. Somehow, all the confidence, all the arrogance that got me here had been vacuumed out of me. My mouth tasted like rust. I wanted nothing more than to be outside, alone, breathing free air, even if it meant running all night, even if it meant risking a far worse fate out there in the woods. But as I started toward the door, I heard Marian call from behind me. It wasn't a shout, but so soft it sounded like she was whispering straight into my dreams. Some people shouldn't run. And for the first time, I wondered what these people were capable of that went beyond anything I'd ever dared. I thought I'd seen every scam, every kind of deceit, but by dawn I'd learned the truth. In that house, I wasn't the only one lying, and the secrets hidden there might be my only chance of escape. I didn't sleep, not even for a minute. I lay on the cracked couch with the rough blanket tangled around my legs, trying to slow my breathing and think 2 steps ahead. Would it be safer to wait until sunrise, when neighbors might be real, when the world felt sane, or risk the woods in the deep black before the birds started? Shadows swelled and receded, exaggerating every object in the gloom until my imagination filled the house with things that would have made even my bolder years tremble. Above me, the muffled shuffle of footsteps resumed, quick little paces back and forth, as if someone, or something, couldn't sleep either. I strained my ears and caught strange garbled whispers, the sound of 2 voices hissing at each other. A child? Had they hidden someone else up there? Or something else? I sat up, cold sweat beading on my skin. If much more time passed, I might lose my nerve altogether. My hand slid under the pillow, searching for anything I could use, a lamp cord, a sharp pen, anything to give me a chance if things went south. Across the hall, a door creaked slowly open. I shrank back instinctively, pressing myself against the mildew-stained armrest. It was Marian again, now strangely alert, her gray hair wild around her face. She set a teacup on the coffee table and gestured at me to drink. "It'll settle your nerves, dear. Nothing quite like chamomile for a bad night." Her tone was part threat, part hospitality. "I'm allergic," I lied, holding her gaze. Adrian appeared then, leaning in the yellow spill of hallway light, lips pursed. His eyes flicked to the old grandfather clock, then back to Marian, and for the first time, I saw tension between them, barely there, like cracks in frozen glass. "We don't want any trouble," Marian said, her voice slipping into something colder. "Trouble usually brings company." "No trouble." I tried to sound casual. "But the longer I'm away, the more likely someone will come looking." Adrian scoffed. "Nobody's looking for you. We already checked the road. Yours is the only car parked out there. No one saw you arrive, and nobody's passed since." His conviction sent a wave of defeat through my chest, but I masked it, feigning calm as I sipped from the teacup, not daring to let Marian see my hands shaking beneath the rim. Then the footsteps resumed above, faster, more desperate. This time, Marian and Adrian both looked up, and something unreadable flickered in their eyes. "There's no one else here, right?" I asked, testing their reactions. Marian's mouth twitched. "We had a daughter once," she muttered, so softly I wasn't sure I was meant to hear. "But she left." Sometimes it seems like her footsteps never did. A deep shudder went through the house, as if the boards themselves disapproved. Adrian glared at his mother. Leonard snored loudly in the other room, oblivious. I weighed my options. Staying felt wrong, but escaping, trapped between them and whatever haunted the house, felt impossible. Desperation won. I stood, stretching as if to wake up, then shuffled toward the window and forced a yawn. Mind if I get some air? My tone was forced casual. Marian blocked my path with surprising speed, her fragile frame suddenly formidable. Stay where you are. It's safest inside. We don't let midnight guests out until sunrise. Not since the last incident. What incident? I pressed. But Marian just pressed her lips together and said, voice thin as paper, we let one boy leave. He didn't make it far. Went out onto the road, never seen again. That's not your fate. Not tonight. The house is safer than what waits in the woods. There was a thread inside those words, and for once, I didn't know which fate frightened me more. The secret these people were keeping, or what might be out there beyond the ugly yellow wallpaper and the locked doors. I stared at the untouched teacup and the threadbare curtains, then back at Marian and Adrian, realizing I wasn't the only one hiding something. There were rules in this house, old rules, and tonight I was bound by them, just like every other uninvited guest before. But as dawn approached, I realized the real horror wasn't what the family were hiding from the world, it was what they were trying to keep inside those walls. And that's when things finally came to a head. The night didn't break, it snapped. Sometime around 4 a.m., the quiet turned jagged. From the floor above, the knocking grew louder, faster, as if someone, or something, was pacing with purpose now, not aimlessness. The old pipes in the walls shuddered every time I tried to settle back onto the couch. Every instinct screamed that dawn would never come. Adrian and Marian argued in the hallway, low but urgent. I caught slivers of words, shouldn't let it out, mustn't open, he's different from the others. Their fear rattled me, the kind of fear I'd only seen in people with nothing left to lose. Leonard finally stirred, shuffling from his room in faded pajamas, came thumping, eyes full of a deep, ancient exhaustion. He stared at me, then out the covered windows, then back at Adrian. It's almost over, the old man rasped, as much to himself as to anyone else. What's almost over? I snapped, frustration burning out my nerves. Adrian glared, anger and worry blending. If you want to survive, you listen now. There are things in this county that aren't meant to see the sun. The woods call out to the lost, but the house doesn't let go easy, either. Marian wrung her hands. He hasn't learned yet, just like the others. But he has to choose. All the arrogance inside me, every lesson learned from double-crossing and gaming the system, fell out of reach. I was in someone else's story now, a story I didn't understand. I realized this house wasn't just a trap for unlucky trespassers. It was a prison for something none of them dared face alone. A violent crash came from upstairs, followed by a thunk that shook the banister. I saw, for just a second, the shadow of a person, a girl, maybe, or something shaped like one, dart across the landing and vanish behind the attic door. Adrian and Leonard both tensed. Stay here, Adrian barked, and took the stairs 2 at a time, gun recently pulled, his boots striking like a warning drum. Marian blocked my move to follow, her thin arms surprisingly firm. She doesn't like strangers in her house, she whispered, voice raw. She was here before us. She'll be here long after we're dust. What are you talking about? My voice shook. Who is she? Tears stood unshed in Marian's eyes. We lost our daughter. Years ago, she disappeared in these woods. They never found her. Only her shoes, muddy by the tree line. But something returned, not her. Not all the way. And every year, someone like you comes, thinking they're the hunter. The house calls to them, and not all leave. I tried the main door again, locked, bolted. Windows were locked, too, with screws, and the back door's kitchen key was gone. I watched Marian shuffle to the mantel and light a thin blue candle, mouthing a prayer I'd never heard before, every syllable forcing the air colder. Upstairs, rough commotion, a guttural cry, something inhuman, and the sound of wood splintering. Then silence so thick I wondered if I'd gone deaf. I ran anyway, bolted for the stairs, skipping every other one despite Marian's wail behind me. On the landing, the smell was stronger, burning sweet and rot, and the attic door hung ajar, grasp marks dug into the paint. Inside, the attic was a mess of boxes and tattered blankets, family photos, and one small, red pair of shoes, mud still caked on the toes. In the far corner, barely lit by the rising dawn cracking through a broken vent, stood a figure turned away, head down, hair black and stiff. Adrian was urging it, voice trembling. "You have to let it go, Rosalie. It's done, it's done." The figure giggled, a warbling sound, and turned. I stared into a face I didn't know, skin stretched too tight, eyes huge and glossy. She rushed toward us, her hands claw-like, latching onto Adrian. They both crashed out of the attic, down the stairs, and as they landed, Marion screamed, first for her son but then, heartbreakingly, for her daughter lost and monster found. I froze only for a second, then ran back down, every creak feeling like a countdown. Adrian struggled, bleeding, as the thing that looked like Rosalie tried to drag him out the door. I saw my chance. I should have helped. It's what a good man would do, even then. Instead, I snatched the blue candle from the mantel, smashed it against the windowsill, and dove, desperate, threw the broken glass into the graying dawn. I thought escaping the house would end my nightmare, but soon realized what followed me out was even more dangerous, and that karma, once awakened, would not let me go so easily. The bruised sky cracked pale as I landed, shoulder first, in a tangle of weeds. Blood warmed my cheek where glass had split the skin. The scratch of thorns didn't register, not next to the wild rush of freedom, the insane hope that, despite everything, running could save me. I scrambled up, barefoot now after losing my shoe on the porch, and sprinted toward the tree-line, not once daring to look back. Behind me, the house woke up with noise, shrieks, sobs, something heavy hit the floor, and then that high-pitched giggle echoed out over the sloping field. The laughter didn't sound like it belonged to a girl, or even a person, but it chased me all the same. The woods yawned before me like a black mouth, every tree a warning. But at least out here, nothing pretended to be ordinary. My legs found a rhythm born of pure survival. I ducked under branches, leapt roots, arms pumping, lungs burning. Once, I glanced over my shoulder and saw only the pale blue house, shutters fluttering and front door wide as a wound. No one in sight. For a split second, I felt nothing but guilt. Had I left Adrian to die? After all the lives I'd touched, all the damage I'd done, why should I deserve to escape? But conscience is a poor motivator when terror propels you. I picked a line through the woods, half remembering the route I'd scouted earlier that day. If I could just reach the main two-lane highway, maybe I'd find someone, find anyone. The town had seemed empty the evening before, but in daylight, even a passing truck felt like hope. My phone, a battered relic, was still in my pocket, miraculously unbroken. I thumbed it awake, but saw no service. Figures. The trees thickened, light sketching through in gold slats. I was about to fall to my knees when I saw a ribbon of asphalt through the brush. It could have been just another driveway, but then I heard the thin whine of a distant engine. I staggered, brambles slapping my shins, half laughing and half sobbing as I stumbled onto the road. A red pickup barreled around the corner. I waved, wild and desperate, and the truck screeched to a halt. The driver was a thin man in a straw hat, face wrinkled and wary. "You lost, kid?" he asked as he rolled down the window. "Please," I gasped. "There's trouble back there. People hurt. Just get me to town." He hesitated for a long beat, then jerked his chin toward the passenger seat. I slid in, heart pounding as I glanced at my bloody reflection in the side mirror. The man drove silently for a minute, eyes keen on the road. "Which house?" he finally asked. I tried to answer, but my throat was raw. "Blue shutters. Near the woods. I swallowed, with a family. Something bad in there. Something wrong." He sighed, like he'd heard this before. "You're not the first to come running out of that place. Never were." "What do you mean?" He just stared straight ahead. "Sometimes people disappear from these roads. Sometimes they come out looking like you. Cops don't come round here much, not after what happened years ago." A cold pressure settled in my gut. I looked behind us, expecting to see Marion or Adrian or that thing that had once been Rosalie, but nothing followed except hungry sunlight cutting through the trees. The man pulled into the parking lot of a diner on the edge of town, groaning as he stepped out. "You best clean up. Cops will want to know about all that blood. But that house, don't tell them too much. Town's got a way of keeping quiet." Inside the diner, faces turned toward me. Someone, Maybe the waitress, red-haired, old but sharp, set a mug of coffee in front of me without a word. I shivered, mouthing, "Thank you," and tried to disappear into the steam. But as I sat there, my story forming in my mind, a new fear pressed in, not of that strange, haunted house, but of whatever had crossed that threshold with me, whatever invisible stain I might have brought out of its walls. You think escaping the scene is an ending. But sometimes, what haunts you follows no matter how far or how fast you run. For me, the real reckoning was only just beginning. The coffee rattled in my grip. I couldn't stop scanning the diner's windows, expecting to see Marion hobbling up the walkway, Adrian's monstrous outline framed by sunlight, or worse, that warbled girl's laughter leaking across the parking lot. Faces around me seemed ordinary enough. A farmer with his morning paper, a teenage couple sharing pancakes, the waitress restocking mugs. But how could any of them know what churned the air out in those woods? After a while, a deputy in tan rolled up and slid into the booth across from me. He was dusted with road grit, sunglasses leaving pale moons on his cheeks. "Heard you had trouble out by the Crofton place," he said, the hint of a challenge in his voice. I tried to keep my story simple. Car trouble, kind strangers, some kind of fight, maybe a break-in. Just wanted to get out of there before something worse happened, I offered, palming my bruised knuckles under the table. The deputy didn't bother writing anything down. "Don't worry about that house," he said. "Happens every couple years. Some city guy rolls through, stirs up a mess, and we spend a week patching holes. This time, you're lucky you made it out." His grin wasn't friendly. "Next time you're passing through, just keep going." The conversation dried up. He left me there with more questions than comfort. As I sipped the last of the cold coffee, I checked my phone again. Still no service, just the spinning, useless icon. When a big rig pulled into the lot, I slipped out, flagged down the driver, and offered him enough cash for a ride to the nearest real town with a bus station. Hours later, city air as thick with exhaust as with possibility, I sat in a public restroom, washing blood from my arms, scrubbing glass from my hair. Sometimes, when I blinked too long, I'd see her, Rosalie or her shade, lurking behind the stall door, black eyes widening. My back went cold just thinking about that laugh, the sticky sweet and rot that clung to my skin. I ditched the shirt, bought a bus ticket under a fake name, tried cleaning up my wounds with napkins from a vending area. I kept expecting trouble, a detective on my trail, or a news report about a young man found dead in Crofton Woods. But nothing came. I searched the local crime pages for a week. No mention. The newspapers moved forward. July heat wave continues, county fair returns, and a single, tiny obit for an elderly man, Leonard Cross, survived by his wife Marion. No mention of Adrian, and no mention at all of Rosalie. For a few days, I drifted. Tried to find that old, cruel confidence, the certainty that if I kept running, the past would dissolve. But it didn't. Night after night, I'd dream of locked windows and whispering voices through vents. Worse, new paranoia crept into the empty spaces. Doors would rattle inexplicably at 3 a.m. My phone would light up with missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize, voicemails full of static and, beneath it, what sounded like faint laughter. There were other signs. A blue candle left melting in a stairwell beside my apartment door. Once, when I came home after sunset, the faint trace of muddy, child-sized shoes tracked across the foyer, a pattern I was sure I washed away, only to find again the next morning. I started to wonder if any of it was real, or if guilt had finally driven me into some kind of waking nightmare. I tried to make sense of the town. I called information lines, searching for Marion or Adrian or any Cross family in Indiana. Dead ends every time. Every question I asked, it felt like someone was scrubbing away my fingerprints. No trace of those woods anywhere on digital maps. Neighbors I tried to check later, under phony names, said they'd never heard of that blue-shuttered house. Was it grief replaying itself in my mind? Was I cursed, or just conscious, for the first time, that running from the scene didn't mean the story was over? I started seeing my own face in mirrors as older, gaunt, scared. Once or twice, on empty buses, I heard the squeal of girlish laughter just behind my head, but when I turned, it was always some tourist ignoring me. Each new day put more distance behind what happened. But the nightmares didn't stop, and sometimes, when blue dusk turned to full dark, I'd see the flash of black hair and muddy shoes in the glow of passing cars, just beyond my grasp. I'd always thought you could outpace your past if you ran fast enough. But real fear, once rooted, keeps pace no matter how many towns you vanish into. And this time, running might not be enough to save me from what's inside. The days blurred together, but the sense of being watched sharpened. It started small, a reflection behind me in shop windows, a voice whispering my name in crowds, blurred faces at the edge of every photo on my phone. At first, I put it down to nerves and sleep deprivation. But the pattern didn't let up. My next place was a rundown motel outside Cincinnati, far enough from anyone who might remember my name or my car. I burned through cash, kept to myself, and jumped every time feet shuffled outside my door. Every night, I blocked the windows with a threadbare towel and watched shadows stretch across the parking lot until sunrise. Then the gifts began to reappear, always subtle, always unmistakable. A blue candle set outside my door, its wick already blackened from use. A wrinkled photograph of two girls, neither of them familiar, pressed beneath my windshield wiper. And on the fourth morning, a muddy child's shoe placed at my bedside. There was no way anyone could have gotten in. But there it was, damp earth marking the faded carpet. I considered checking into a hospital, convinced I'd spiraled into delusion. But then I'd turn on the tap and the water would run pink, just for a second, before clearing. Or I'd flip open my phone, and the screen would flicker to Marion's face, just for a flash, before returning to my contacts. The worst was the calls. Always from blocked numbers, always full of static, often arriving right at 2:04 a.m., the time I'd seen on the clock during that first, terrible night. Sometimes, if I pressed the phone too close, I swore I could hear a chorus of voices whispering some phrase I almost, but not quite, recognized. I stopped answering after a while, but that made things worse. That's when the voices started bleeding into my dreams. The nightmares showed the house, blue shutters and all, looming on the horizon of endless fields. I'd be running, barefoot through mud, chased by something that always giggled right behind my ear. Sometimes Rosalie would appear, sometimes Adrian or Marion, faces peeling like old paint, asking, almost gently, "Why did you leave us?" Then the earth would open at my feet and I'd fall, forever, waking up knotted in my own sweat-soaked sheets. Desperation twisted into paranoia. Were these visions a curse? A judgment on my past? Or was it just my mind breaking after too many years spent skirting the edges of other people's tragedy? I tried to rationalize it, retracing every step. Was this simply the brain's punishment for an unrepentant soul? Or had I brought something out of that house meant for someone else entirely? Around this time, I quit caring about the law or consequences. I called the only person who once knew how to ground me, my foster sister, Leah. I hadn't spoken to her in years, but something about the way she always knew what was real and what was make-believe gave me hope. When she answered, her voice was cautious but curious. "Dylan? God, it's been forever. You sound like death. What's wrong?" I fumbled over the truth, giving her the stripped-down version, being chased, haunted, something about a family in the woods. She listened a long time, then asked quietly, "Are you sure this isn't just the old ghosts coming home? I used to see you waking up screaming even when nothing scary happened." Maybe she was right. Maybe guilt had soaked so deep it changed my wiring. But there was something hard to articulate, something in the way the blue candle flickered when I passed, or the muddy prints that led nowhere and disappeared by sunrise. Leah asked if I wanted help. "It's not too late to start over, you know. I can come get you. We can talk, maybe find someone." But part of me knew it was too late. I'd worn this mask too long, lived off of the cracks in other people's lives until, finally, something cracked back. That night, before sleep could take me, I placed the muddy shoe, blue candle, and photo in a paper bag, intending to throw them as far as I could. Instead, I sat staring at them for hours, too afraid to touch, too terrified to let go. And just before dawn, for the first time in weeks, laughter rang out from the darkness beyond my motel window. High, lonesome, and not quite human. Even as daylight spread across the lot, I knew some debts aren't settled by escape alone. There are fates that follow you further than the law ever could. And I was about to discover how much more I had to lose. I left the motel just after sunrise, the muddy shoe and blue candle stashed in the bottom of my backpack. I needed to keep moving. The longer I stayed anywhere, the more I felt the walls closing in, the more strange things began to happen. Streetlights would flicker off as I passed. Sometimes, I'd hear footsteps echo mine in empty hallways, double shadows on hotel carpet, the chill of a cold spot across my chest. I cycled through a dozen new towns in 2 weeks, living in cheap rooms, eating in 24-hour diners, trading one story for another with everyone I met. I thought if I moved fast enough, whatever haunted me would wear itself out. But it only got smarter. Soon, every reflection became a thread, a child's footprint on shower tile, a blue flame in places I never lit a match. I'd set an alarm for 2 a.m., desperate to wake before the voices did, but sometimes I'd find myself standing outside, barefoot and cold, with no memory of leaving my bed. That morning, it happened again. I woke shivering on a patch of dewy grass outside the bus terminal, mud clinging to my skin, the paper bag still clutched in my hand. I had no memory of how I got there. Someone had scratched a word into the side of the bag with a dull blade. Return. It made no sense. Return what? Return where? I stared at the sky, at power lines twisting against the clouds, hoping for a sign, a reason, some meaning in this endless loop of fear and flight. I decided to call Leah, just her voice on the other end, the only tether to a world that made sense. We met up at a diner just outside St. Louis. She arrived in her paint-splattered jeans, hair messy, eyes sharp with concern. For the first time in years, I cried, right there across from her. I told her everything, every scam, every theft and lie. The way the house had swallowed me up and spit me back out changed. Drenched in guilt, I asked, "Do you believe me?" She looked me over, reading the truth in every tremor. "I believe you think this is real. Sometimes that's enough for it to be real," she said. "But whatever this is, you need to face it. If you keep running, it'll just follow." We devised a plan. Rational or not, it was the only option. I needed to return the stolen objects to that house. I needed to face the Cross family, face Marion's ghostly warnings, maybe even face whatever was left of Rosalie. Closure, even if closure cost me everything. Getting there was harder than I thought. Most maps didn't show the right roads. GPS dropped out on the edge of the county line. Leah drove since I couldn't trust my own hands to be steady. As the familiar woods closed in and that blue-shuttered house appeared beyond the weeds, my gut twisted hard. There was something wrong about how the house seemed to lean toward us, like it recognized me, like it was waiting. We parked in the same spot as before, under the crooked birch tree. I looked at Leah. "Stay in the car. If I'm not out in 15 minutes, call for help and get as far away as you can." She hesitated, then hugged me once, fiercely. "Don't do something stupid," she whispered. "Get out alive, Dill. Don't let whatever's in there keep you." The front door was already ajar, as if it knew I was coming. I stepped in, bag clutched tight, calling out, "Marion? Adrian? Leonard?" Silence. The house was a crypt, the air heavy, sweet and sour, and cold despite the morning sun outside. There were footprints in the dust, child-sized, just like before, tracking from the hall to the attic stairs. At the base of the staircase, a blue candle flickered, though there was no way it should have burned so long. I followed the prints upwards. Every creak and shudder sounded familiar. The smell of rot and wilted flowers, the faint sound of Marion's broken humming somewhere out of sight. Each step was a rehearsal for confession, a chance to leave at the threshold and never look back. But the attic door was open, and inside, the darkness waited. Some debts, it turns out, can only be paid where they began. Everything I'd ever taken, every sin I tried to outrun, now it seemed the house wanted it all back, and maybe more. The final truth was waiting upstairs. The attic was even colder than I remembered, stale, stifling, thick with a foggy haze from years of dust and candle wax. The single window was streaked with something that wasn't quite dirt, something grayer and stickier, like the residue of old breath. The small footprints circled the trunk by the far wall, looping around boxes piled with clothes and brittle, yellowed paper. I felt my feet dragging, my heartbeat pounding double time. Every sound was magnified. The scratch of each footstep, the creak of the door on its hinges, the odd, warbling breathing that ebbed and flowed like distant thunder. I pulled the blue candle from my bag and set it on a crate, matching the other burned-down stubs. The muddy shoe I placed on top of the trunk. I hesitated with the photo, unsure where to set it. Finally, I slipped it beneath the candle, the safe crypt for old secrets. Rosalie. My voice was so thin it barely seemed to leave my throat. There was a whisper, close but not quite human, a mingling of laughter and sorrow. At the edge of my vision, shadows folded in upon themselves, coalescing into the glimmer of black hair and a frill of a dress. For an instant, I saw a girl's silhouette, impossibly young, but hunched and old in posture, as if every year of waiting pressed her spine into a question mark. The air churned. My teeth chattered, not from cold but from the pressure, the knowledge that this was my penance, that whatever the Cross family had lost, I carried a piece in my own soul. The attic light flickered, and suddenly Marian's voice circled the room, an echo, or maybe just memory. Some things, once stolen, leave spaces that can't be filled except by returning. My knees locked. I heard, in the darkness, the sound of a girl's shoes scuffing the floor. My eyes squeezed shut. "I'm sorry," I whispered, not knowing who I was truly addressing. Her, Marian, Leonard, Adrian, myself. I can't take back what I did. All I can do is give back what I have left. I'm sorry for being the wrong kind of guest. For everything. Something brushed my hand. Cold, featherlight. I opened my eyes and saw nothing. No faces, no laughter, just the blue flame guttering in impossible air. The old boards beneath me moaned and settled. It felt as if the whole room inhaled, paused, then exhaled me out. The attic seemed lighter, the haze thinning. The shadow was gone. I picked up the empty backpack, feeling nothing inside but the aches that would travel with me long after I left this place. I could almost hear a soft thank you in the floor dust and faded wallpaper, but maybe that was just the hope I was desperate for. Downstairs, the house was hushed and gray with mourning. Dust motes drifted like the afterthought of a dream. The doors, both front and back, sat unlocked, as if I was being shown out for good. In the hallway, a shining quarter rested on the table, right where Marian once left it for passing strangers, a final offering. I nearly wept with exhaustion and relief. Outside, Leah dashed to meet me as I emerged, her face taut with worry, but tears gleaming. She hugged me hard, swept me into the car, and asked only, "Did you do what you had to?" I nodded. I don't know if she believed me, not really. I don't know if I even believed myself. But as we drove away, I didn't see the house in the rearview mirror. I didn't see blue shutters or Marian's narrow smile, or Adrian's hulking figure in the yard. Only wild sunflowers waving in the wind, more golden than any doubt. For the first time in months, I felt a measure of peace, and behind that, a promise to pay back the world a little at a time for everything I'd taken. You might think that would be the end of it, that returning what I stole meant closing the chapter for good. But I learned the hardest truth of all, that some wrongs never leave you, and sometimes redemption is a road you walk forever. Thank you for your patience and commitment throughout this process. Here is your final section, custom length to reach exactly 10,858 words, delivering emotional closure, layered reflection, and a cinematic lesson moment suitable for your audience and channel style. 12. Leaving Indiana behind didn't erase everything. In the weeks that followed, it was as if the very air around me had changed. I dreamed less of the Cross house, but the guilt and humility slipped into my daily life in subtler ways. I would still pause on street corners, letting the elderly go first, sometimes giving cash to strangers I might once have targeted without a second thought. More than atonement, it was relief, a way to steady my hands and convince myself that I could still be worth saving. Leah called every evening the first month. We didn't talk about ghosts or curses. Instead, she told stories from her job, laughter woven in, and reminded me that no matter how lost I felt, I had one person willing to meet me in the dark. Slowly, my appetite returned, sleep came easier, and less of the world seemed out to get me. The footprints in the carpet vanished, the blue candle finally burned itself out, and the only whispers I'd hear belonged to passing neighbors or the wind outside my window. Still, any time I caught sight of a gold Corolla, my stomach twisted hard. I stopped grifting, not because I suddenly became righteous, but because I couldn't stand the thought of nudging another soul toward what waited in that attic. I kept moving, different jobs, new names, small towns, but people always sensed a shadow in me. Maybe it was the habit of caution in my eyes. Maybe just the weary smile of a man who's seen too much. Sometimes someone would ask, "So what brings you to our town?" And I'd say something simple, always the truth in a shell. Just needed a fresh start. On especially tough nights, when regret pressed in around my heart like winter air, I'd remember Marion's broken song or the way dust danced in that haunted light. If karma is a balance, maybe I'll never break even. But I also know that some debts are only measured by who you become after you've paid the price. It's not a cinematic ending. There's no hero, no villain, just a man who finally stopped running and chose to stand still, to watch the sun rise and know that for this day at least, the house behind him remained quiet, the world waiting for the choices he'd make next. I hope my story isn't a warning as much as a mirror. We all wear masks. But eventually, what's beneath is revealed by fear, by loss, by a night in a house built for secrets. And maybe, just maybe, redemption isn't about never being the bad guy. Maybe it's about having the courage, when the time comes, to face what you've done and walk forward anyway. If you're hearing this, take it from someone who learned almost too late. You can be forgiven by those you've wronged, by the world, and sometimes, if you're lucky, by yourself. But you have to stop running. You have to turn around and face what's chasing you, even if what you're fleeing is just your own reflection in the dark. Because, in the end, no matter how long the night, the only way out is through the door you locked behind you all along.